So, a new Kirby game just came out, but I cannot for the life of me remember what it's called. Can you come over here and help us out, Mr. Overview Trailer Announcer Narrator Guy? Pretty please?
Kirby and the Forgotten Land, Nintendo Switch 2 Edition, plus Star-Crossed World.
Oh wow, they sure went all mouthful mode on us with that title. Oh, I'll be here all night. Like, actually, this is a big video. Hey everyone, how's it going? It's Pekachow, and it's been a while, hasn't it? And not just since I've last uploaded. Isn't that right, Kirby? So, Kirby and the Forgotten Land, Nintendo Switch 2. Okay, you know what? Screw it. We're just calling it Star-Crossed World. So, Star-Crossed World is finally here, and if I didn't already make it apparent, this is just huge. Star-Crossed World is technically the first new Kirby game we've gotten in 2.5 years! Yeah, it's been a while, and I feel like I can confidently say that this is just, like, the longest Kirby game drought there has ever been, like, in history. I don't think we've ever gone, like, 2 full years without any new Kirby game of any kind. And let's just say, this was a dark time for yours truly, because I had no new Kirby content to live on, except some new merch, I guess. I picked some of that stuff up. We didn't even get our random early fall shadow-dropped Kirby spin-off game for 2 years in a row, like... What? Okay, I kid. I don't want to make this drought, quote-unquote, sound worse than it actually was, because, well, I think that would be kind of insensitive to any diehard F-Zero or Star Fox or whatever else fans in the room. Although I think I'm definitely allowed to make those jokes as a diehard Pokemon Mystery Dungeon fan. I'm recording this before the September 2025 Direct, by the way. I'm seriously hoping that last recording ages like milk. But back on topic, with all this context I just provided, I cannot understate how magical it was just tuning into that first Nintendo Switch 2 Direct and being met with a surprise appearance from Kirby while the presenters were just yapping about their Nintendo Switch 2 editions and whatnot. And it was in, like, the most unexpected way possible, because I did not have Forgotten Land DLC on my bingo card, but that's essentially what happened. Star-Crossed World is basically Forgotten Land DLC for the Switch 2. But then you combine that reveal with the reveal of Kirby Air Riders, and it was just... Yes, this is exactly what we needed. 2 Kirby games back-to-back in the span of a few months after 2.5 years of nothing, but that is a topic for another day, because Air Riders isn't out yet, so I can't really talk about it. And it's also Star-Crossed World season anyway, so let's talk about Star-Crossed World. Now, Star-Crossed World isn't necessarily a new Kirby game in the same way something like Air Riders is, since it's essentially just a new story DLC thingy that you get bundled in with the upgrade to Forgotten Land on the Switch 2. It's a key part of the game's Switch 2 edition, and basically just to get a little context in here, Switch 2 editions are like upgraded versions of Switch 1 games with improved frame rates, resolution, and sometimes they'll throw in some new content that costs $10 to $20 extra, because apparently buying the $500 new hardware just isn't enough to play the games you've already got at the new frame rate and resolution. Yeah, if it's not obvious, I've got a laundry list of issues with the whole Switch 2 edition model Nintendo is trying to push, as well as a ton of other crap they're trying to pull this generation, which I'm not even going to get into here. And while just about every Switch 2 edition we completely know about so far either just charges you extra to play the games at a higher frame rate and resolution, or tries to disguise it with what's essentially like a free update's worth of content for $10 to $20, Forgotten Land literally has the only currently available Switch 2 edition that has any business costing what it does, is locking the improved frame rate and resolution behind a $20 paywall absolutely deplorable. Yes, it absolutely is. Locking 4K 60 FPS Forgotten Land behind a paywall on the 4K 60 FPS Switch 2 is just another level of uncool. But when you look at Star-Crossed World as like a $20 DLC on top of Forgotten Land, I really don't think there's much of an issue there. Sure, you can argue that they could have done or added a few little things in order to justify the price further. Maybe you think the quantity was a little too low for $20, which are criticisms I get and even understand to an extent. but you just can't deny the quality in, like, literally every other aspect of Star-Crossed World. It is just some top-quality Kirby. And that's exactly what I'm here to talk about today, why I think Star-Crossed World is just amazing for what it is, and how it manages to be nearly a perfect add-on to the already phenomenal base game that is Forgotten Land. And while Star-Crossed World isn't particularly lengthy, as you can see, I've clearly got a lot to say about it, so let's waste no more time on this intro and dive right in. But before we do that, I think there's an old friend we should check on first. Yeah, Kirby in the Forgotten Land. Yeah, Forgotten Land. Ah, yes, good old Forgotten Land. What can I say about you that hasn't already been said? You beautiful, beautiful game, you. Forgotten Land is such an incredible game, and my old review on it is not. It is bad. It is very, very bad. It was the first review I ever made, so it's kind of a given, but like dude. The audio comes out of one ear, which was like a problem with a lot of my old videos for some reason. And also, I just say some of the dumbest things you could ever say about Forgotten Land. Ice Kirby only has 2 moves, and you'll probably only be using the Ice Breath. And you'll probably only be using the Ice Breath. And you'll probably only be using the Ice Breath. And you'll probably only be using the Ice Breath. Part of me really did want to bundle a sort of Forgotten Land re-review in this video, because I just adore Forgotten Land so much, even more than I did back then, and I just really want to give it another shot and a more proper, in-depth review, but that base has already kind of been covered by this magnificent video right here, which I also make a guest appearance in. Ooh, you might want to check that out if you haven't. And also, my schedule's looking pretty packed for the remainder of this year, so I don't know if that would have been a smart time investment with all this stuff on my plate. Although a Forgotten Land re-review is still something I do want to take a crack at, maybe in the far future when we have maybe 1 or 2 more 3D Kirby games to look at, so we can kind of look at Forgotten Land with that hindsight, see how well it aged in comparison, perhaps. But that's years off, and that's why I decided to just not re-review Forgotten Land in this video, even though Star-Crossed World really did give me just a golden opportunity to. Although during the production of this video, I did decide to replay Forgotten Land on the Switch 2, just to experience all the new little changes and things the Switch 2 edition brings, and also because it's been a hot minute since I last replayed Forgotten Land. So, since I won't be able to fit a whole re-review in here are Pekachow's updated thoughts on Kirby and the Forgotten Land in Big 2025 on Big Switch 2 after, like, 4 or 5 replays. And don't give me that look, you saw the title. This is a Forgotten Land plus Star-Crossed World review, not just Star-Crossed World. You guys are gonna hear me tweak out about Forgotten Land again, and you're gonna like it. This game is still peak. The gameplay is amazing. Mouthful Mode's one of my favorite gimmicks in the series. The abilities translate perfectly into 3D, although Crash is 100% a sneak. It should not be here. The ability selection is great otherwise, though, and the upgrade system is awesome. The level design is also incredible. Moonlight Canyon in particular is just absolute peak. I love Waddle Dee Town. It's such a wonderful place. The OST is one of the best in the entire series, and once again, Moonlight Canyon is peak. I love the New World as a setting. I love how basically every level contributes to the world building of the New World in some cool, interesting way, whether it be like revealing stuff like the corporations we see all over the place that are just relics of a long-gone civilization, or all the enemies we see just kind of casually minding their own business, not even going after Kirby, which just makes the world feel lived in despite being a very post-apocalyptic setting. The story is great as well. I love Elfilin, I love the build-up to the truth behind the Beast Pack and Leongar being mind-controlled by Fecto Forgo and all that stuff. The lore is just super cool in general. The finale still goes insanely hard after all these years. I swear I will never ever get tired of watching the vehicular manslaughter of Fecto Elfilis. Tilt and Roll Kirby is still the bane of my existence. And while I can definitely see how improving on the gameplay of Forgotten Land and subsequent 3D entries, if there's one thing I know about Forgotten Land that's going to be hard to top, it's the charm, because it just oozes throughout Forgotten Land, and it's probably my favorite thing about the entire game. There's just so much attention to detail in every stage, so many cool little secrets you can find, even small things like the fact you can just dine in at the Waddle Dee Cafe, which triggers this adorable cutscene, which really had no reason to be there considering free healing is just across the street in Kirby's house. It's just all so peak. Even after all these years, Forgotten Land just continues to blow me away, and it's just such an incredibly amazing game. It's without a doubt one of my favorites in the series, even after all this time. But now, the question is, how does the Switch 2 edition enhance and improve the game? And is it for better or worse? Well, I suppose we should get the biggest change between the Switch 1 and Switch 2 version out of the way right now, and that is the frame rate. Yeah, there's a difference in the resolution, but honestly, they both look phenomenal. I didn't really notice much of a difference, but then again, I'm not too much of like a technical graphics freak, so I don't know, maybe I'm missing some important stuff, but both games look great. It doesn't really matter. You can't go wrong with either. But when it comes to the frame rate difference, oh, I've got things to say about the frame rate difference. Forgotten Land on Switch 1 ran at 30 frames per second, and as someone who's not really a frame rate freak, you could tell me it ran at like a significantly higher FPS and I'd probably believe you. Yeah, if it's not abundantly clear. When it comes to frame rates, really all I'm looking for is it to be relatively smooth and stable, and Forgotten Land meets that criteria. It absolutely does, at least for me. I never really had any issues with the original game's frame rate. It just ran pretty smooth. It didn't feel choppy at all. I guess sometimes the performance has its issues, but it's usually pretty unintrusive whenever it does, so I didn't really have any complaints. But then this guy came along, and at first I was like, okay, it's 60 FPS, so what? Frame rate people are crazy. There's not going to be that much of a noticeable difference. But then I actually started playing the Switch 2 edition of Forgotten Land, and it felt like a dream. So much so that going back to play the original Switch 1 version of the game, it just felt like it snapped me right out of the dream. It was like back to reality. It felt weirdly choppy after being spoiled with 60 FPS Forgotten Land. And the craziest thing is, these technical improvements are not even the only things the Switch 2 edition of Forgotten Land has over the original. And no, we're not including Star-Crossed World in this, because obviously Star-Crossed World is an improvement. Let's just ignore that. Throw that out of the picture for a minute. And that's because, with HAL being HAL, they decided to sneak all sorts of new little secrets into Forgotten Land that weren't there in the base game, and they're awesome. Granted, it's mostly just a bunch of like small little Waddle Dee Town Easter eggs that don't really add much to the overall game, but it's just the fact that they're here that adds just so much more charm to an already charming game. So obviously the version that amplifies that the slightest bit more is going to be more preferable in my book. These Easter eggs I'm talking about in particular impact two Waddle Dee Town facilities, with the first one being the Waddle Dee Cafe, which now on the Switch 2 edition, when you choose to dine in and eat a Carmouth cake or a Kirby burger, you have a chance of instead eating a Crystal Carmouth cake or a sparkly-eyed Kirby burger, complete with the little expression from Dream Buffet. And speaking of Dream Buffet, when you go over to my beloathed Tilt and Roll Kirby and you choose to play my super duper loathed level 3 on super hard mode, there's a chance that the usual Tilt and Roll Kirby music will be replaced with a new song called Kirby's Tilt and Roll Festival, which is just a homage to Dream Buffet. It's a cute little reference and a neat little song, although I really don't appreciate the absolute heart attack that this gave me when I was just going through the Waddle Live Corner stage, hearing all the new music after I beat Star-Crossed World's main story, only to see this theme pop up, which made me think that there was more Tilt and Roll Kirby added in Star-Crossed World, which thankfully there is not. It's just an Easter egg. There is no super duper hard mode, thankfully. And yeah, I'm not sure what else to say about these Easter eggs. They're just cute little things that I really appreciate just having around. They add the slightest bit more charm to the game's world, and you know how much I appreciate little stuff like that. And on top of that, there's all the other little changes I haven't even mentioned that don't really add too much, but they're still neat to have. Like the Past Adventures book having Dream Buffet and Return to Dreamland Deluxe in it now, Kirby having new emote sounds and vocalizing more during mouthful modes, and even some really minor HUD changes here and there. There really is a surprising amount of changes to where it almost feels like a slightly different version beyond just the general frame rate and resolution increase. So, is there anything the original version has over the Switch 2 edition? Well, yeah, there is one thing. And that's the hammer glitch, because unfortunately, to my knowledge, I'm like 99% sure it has been patched out. No! Rest in peace, hammer glitch. You're one of the coolest Kirby glitches of all time. You'll never be forgotten. Land. No, seriously, it sucks that the hammer glitch was patched out along with all its contemporaries like the fire and ice super jumps, because these glitches were just the harmless fun that really didn't get in the way of anything. They were just kind of a fun thing to mess around with on the side. What this means is that in the Switch 2 edition, you can no longer use these glitches to fly out of bounds, there's no more double Chaos Alphaless fight you can activate, and worst of all, like seriously worst of all, you can no longer farm easy rare stones, which sucks because Star-Crossed World did not add a way to get rare stones any easier. This means that anyone who wants to fully upgrade all their copy abilities on the Switch 2 version is gonna be left grinding the Coliseum over and over and over again. Although, thankfully, as I discovered, if you own both games physically, you can swap between the Switch 2 version and the Switch 1 version at will. And if you put the Switch 1 cartridge in, all of your data from Star-Crossed World is saved and carried over, although Star-Crossed World and all that stuff is removed. Though it doesn't go anywhere if you put the Switch 2 version back in. And if you are playing the Switch 1 version, you're able to use the hammer glitch to your heart's content, so you can farm rare stones and then pop the Switch 2 version back in and you'll just be loaded up with a bunch of those guys. I'm not sure if you can swap between versions if you own both or just a single version digitally, since both of mine are physical, but hopefully you can, because man, that would really be a shame if you couldn't. But still, despite the loss of the hammer jump and other super jump glitches in the Switch 2 version being extremely tragic, I'd still say that the Switch 2 version is overall better than the Switch 1 version, if only just for that incredibly smooth frame rate and all the fun little Easter eggs you can find dotted around Waddle Dee Town now. And that is the Nintendo Switch 2 Edition part of Kirby and the Forgotten Land, Nintendo Switch 2 Edition, plus Star-Crossed World. What a name. The Switch 2 version of Forgotten Land has done its job in almost entirely making Forgotten Land even better than it was on the Switch 1. But now, we can finally dive into the main attraction, which is Star-Crossed World, the brand new story that was included with this upgrade. And with all the base game improvements and tweaks out of the way, let's waste no time diving into this. Oh, I've been waiting to say this about a new Kirby game for so long. Let's get into this. Yes. So, Star-Crossed World takes place after the first world. That's when it gets started, canonically, I guess. Now, I say this because if you start up a new save file on the Switch 2 edition of Forgotten Land, the moment you beat Gorimondo and return to the world map, you're just instantly thrust into Star-Crossed World without a moment to breathe. The first cutscene just plays instantly, and personally, I think that's a little odd. Technically, Star-Crossed World can get started also at literally any other point in the game past the first world, as long as you have a save file you transfer over from the Switch 1 edition, because the moment you go to the world map, you'll just instantly be thrust into it there. Like, for example, here's me playing on my 100% save file, which I think honestly makes a lot more sense, because the whole premise of Star-Crossed World is there's a bunch of crystals falling all over the place, and they're crystallizing all the areas in the Forgotten Land, which it's kind of weird when you have this whole separate conflict going on top of Forgotten Land's main story. It just feels more like a post-game thing, even though it technically isn't. Oh, and by the way, if you transfer over a save that has Elfilin currently captured by the time you start playing it on the Switch 2 edition, then you will get an entirely different intro cutscene that has no Elfilin whatsoever and different music. It's so crazy that HAL bothered to make this alternate version of the opening for something you can't even, like, natively trigger in the Switch 2 version, because you need a save from the Switch 1 version to even get this cutscene to play in the first place. At least naturally. You can watch it in the theater either way. But I'm just saying, there was absolutely no reason why HAL couldn't just, like, restrict you from starting Star-Crossed World if Elfilin was captured or something, but they were just so adamant in thrusting you into it the moment you open your save that they made this entirely different version of the intro, and just added different music on top of it, because why not? This is the type of attention to detail I love in Forgotten Land, and just this series in general. Except for you. What happened? Anyways, canon placement aside, the story begins whenever it does, with Kirby and Elfilin riding around on the Warp Star until suddenly, it's an oddly heart-shaped meteor, and those look like those things from another dimension! Okay, I'll cool with the conspiracy lore BS. At least for now. So Kirby and Elfilin see this meteor crash into the ocean, with a bunch of crystals trailing close behind, scattering all over the world, only for the meteor's impact to cause a volcanic island to rise. Our heroes land on the newly emerged Fallen Star volcano to investigate, only to see the meteor raw without any of its crystal coating. And before long, a Waddle Dee by the name of Astronomer Waddle Dee, I love this guy by the way, enters the scene, explaining that this meteor's arrival was apparently a legend in the past of the New World, one that told of a star of darkness coming down and terrorizing the land, but it also stated that stars of light could prevent the disaster from occurring. Kirby then finds a piece of the shattered crystal shell on the ground, and when he goes over to investigate, it turns out to be one of these little guys, a Starry. And who would have guessed, these little star children are actually the stars of light that were spoken of in the legend, with Elfilin actually being able to understand what the little guy says as they turn back into a small piece of the meteor's crystal seal, confirming that these little ones are indeed the key to preventing the disaster. And so with that, Kirby and Elflin head out to go find the rest of the Starries and to seal the star before it's too late. And that's really all there is to the story here, at least until we get to the ending, but, you know, spoilers. Honestly, it's just a classic Kirby plot setup. It's simple, but it's effective, and it really works at just getting you hooked in and eager to see where the story goes, whether you're a new fan or completely Kirby brain-rotted like myself. And so, with the stage for Kirby's Starry-saving story set, let's waste no time and dive right into they gave point of arrival a spot on the map screen. They gave point of arrival a spot on the map. So Star-Crossed World's main story consists of 12 Starry stages, and the deal with these Starry stages is that they're like remixes of stages from the base game. As I said earlier, Star-Crossed World starts up on a new save the moment you beat Natural Plains, and from there, Star-Crossed World gets into this kind of loop that goes along concurrently with the main story, as after you beat the first 2 Starry stages here, you'll play through the next world as you usually would until you beat the boss, and then you'll unlock the next 2 Starry stages. And it's just like that, rinse and repeat until the game's through, with the grand finale being locked behind the post-game after Fectoelphilus is defeated, which is just another reason why I feel like this should have been post-game content instead of happening alongside the main story, but I digress. Much like how the base game set you up with the primary objective of saving all the captured Waddle Dees throughout its stages, here you're setting out to save the Starries in order to seal the Star of Darkness up again, piece by piece. You'll find these Star Children sealed in crystals and hidden throughout the stages of Wait Up, sealed in crystals, eh? Although each stage obviously has some additional missions you can clear as well to save even more. There's 120 Starries to save in total, and saving them all is a blast, thanks to the incredible stage design literally every stage in this expansion has to offer. So, remember when I called these stages remixes? Yeah, technically, that's what these are, but they're more like completely new stages in execution. Basically, what goes on here is each stage opens up on an altered version of the first room of whatever stage the Starry stage is based on, but from there, you're led down an alternate path that just completely changes the stage and allows us to see it from an entirely new perspective. And more often than not, these alternate paths are made accessible through one of Star-Crossed World's new additions, arguably the most important of the bunch, that being the Starry Flowers, which are these little flowers, and when they're popped, they make all sorts of cool stuff happen. Sometimes they'll make collectibles appear, usually in the form of Starry Coins, which are the new currency Star-Crossed World introduces. Other times they'll make enemies appear, but almost always they're opening up alternate crystal paths or making new platforms appear. Starry Flowers also come in big and small variants as well, with really the only major differences coming in terms of their effect radius, and the fact that the big ones need to be attacked in order to activate, unlike the more pop flower-esque small ones. There's also a pink variant of the big one that shows up from time to time, and what this one does is it makes some platforms appear for a short time, making for some pretty fun little timed challenges. Starry Flowers are just used excellently in the level design to enhance exploration or challenges to find hidden Starries, and while they're not like a game-changing addition or anything, they do enough to give all the Starry stages a pretty distinct identity compared to those from the base game, especially since these are unlike really anything the base game has to offer. Obviously, Star-Crossed World has excellent level design. I feel like it's something that should really go without saying here because, I mean, it's more Forgotten Land. What were you expecting? Not peak level design? But still, when I say this stuff is amazing, I mean it's amazing even by the usual high Kirby standards. Like, seriously, the quality average between all 12 of these stages is nothing to scoff at because they never get worse than just being great. And the fact that that's the bar here should really be indicative of how high quality all these stages really are. Now, I'm not gonna go in and dissect each stage in depth here because I feel like that's something best saved for a Forgotten Land retrospective review later down the road. You know, maybe my Forgotten Land re-review in 10 years. We can do that. So, see you all in 10 years for that. What I want to do here is touch on a lot of the big points as to why these stages really manage to reach the heights they do, starting with a slightly in-depth look at the first stage that perfectly explains the brilliance that a lot of these stages are built on. Okay, I know I said that I wasn't going to do this, but I promise this is important. Meteor Shower's arrival is the first of Star-Crossed World's Starry stages, and it instantly manages to set the tone for the rest of Star-Crossed World's stages by starting us right off on the beach point of arrival opens up on, although this time it's looking a little different with all the crystal meteors strewn all over the place. From here, the little forest tutorial section has brilliantly been repurposed into a sort of Starry Flower tutorial that also does a brilliant job introducing the mechanic, while also giving us some crystals to smash, which really shows that Star-Crossed World isn't afraid to drastically shake up any old level designs it manages to work back in. And then we get hit with this cutscene here in place of that big spectacle shot with the camera zooming out to focus on your first real glimpse of the new world. And do you know just how amazing this new version of that old sequence is? Think back to when Forgotten Land was first revealed, or whenever you first played it. That moment right there, where Kirby steps out of the silent forest and into this glorious, colorful landscape that has obviously seen better days, was huge. It's when those first few notes of running through the new world hit. It looks awesome with the camera zooming out to really highlight the massive building and all the 3D space Kirby finally has to run around in. And this was literally like the big trailer moment. It got the logo fading in and everything, and it was awesome. But the thing is, that building over there was always just for show. And that was okay, because obviously the point of it was to be like a cool spectacle set piece, and it absolutely killed it at that. But in Star-Crossed World, it's for show no longer, because once that crystal shrapnel hits, bam, crystal paths up the building, and also it terrestrialized Luffy, because why not? Because we're seeing the Forgotten Land from a new perspective, and this is not the only time Star-Crossed World does this kind of thing. As the stages go on, Kirby explores a lot of previously inaccessible areas in the main game, including some you might have not even thought about. And interestingly enough, we even get to see how certain stages connect in a sense, with some like washed away at the cement summit, revealing that there's actually a whole fast-flowing waterworks area beneath these cement islands we see all over Everbay Coast. And there's also crossing Windaria, which has us traverse through the House of Horrors through a roller coaster track, and I feel like all this stuff really combines together, not only to enhance Forgotten Land's already stellar world building, but to really cement Star-Crossed World's main concept, that being seeing the new world from a new perspective. And this here's an idea I want to elaborate on more in the conclusion, since it's just a major part of the whole DLC beyond just the level design, so do keep it in mind, but just know that's why Star-Crossed World uses the remixed level framing for its stages, or at least I'm like 99% sure, because you never know with how. The way this idea of seeing this now familiar location that is the new world in a new way is emphasized by these stages, to the point where it almost feels like it's foreshadowing the climax and the lore in that way by being so thematically similar, because seeing the new world from a new perspective is something that the lore in Star-Crossed World will make you do. No spoilers, but it does that. It's just endlessly cool to me how Star-Crossed World just takes us beyond the boundaries of the original game in ways I don't think anyone was expecting, and it's just like, I could just go on forever about this. To wrap my discussion of this idea up for now, though, the remixed level framing angle the starry stages use is awesome, not just for how much more interesting it makes the otherwise totally new designs, but for how it makes the stages tie into the grander expansion as a whole, and how it also works to flesh out the old stages, and the locations, and just the new world in general. And you know how much good background world building like this means to me if you've seen my extensive Kirby 64 retrospective, where I go into the topic of good background world building extensively. But let's leave it at this. Jumping atop the rooftops of Point of Arrival hits almost exactly as something like exploring those shady stairwells in Shiver Star 4 would to me, and let it be known, that there is some high praise, because I really want to go down those stairwells. It's not just the idea and grander meaning of these stages that really makes them great, though, as these stages of course have some absolutely brilliant designs to back all this supplementary stuff up too. All that stuff I mentioned is just the cherry on top of more Forgotten Land levels, also known as masterpieces of level design. And I guess the best place to really jump into Star-Crossed World's level design would be, what's new? What new elements does Star-Crossed World introduce beyond just the Starry Flowers, since it relies so heavily on the base game in so many aspects? Well, there's 3 new mouthful modes, and I guess there's also new crystal variants of the enemies. They're stronger, bulkier, they rock their crystal dews and whatnot. I will admit though, I'm a tiny bit let down we didn't get at least one new enemy in the game, but maybe that's because I'm just like that one weird guy who always has seeing the new creatures and enemies and whatnot high up on my list of things I'm excited to see in the next Kirby game. At the very least though, we did get a new mid-boss in the form of the Galactal, also known as the Crystal Monster who shoots meteors in this mission description of Lost in Arrival Mall, which they're calling it that like they didn't just reveal this guy's name on Twitter days before launch. And also Galactal, what's up with that name? But yeah, we got a new mid-boss. I think they're pretty cool. The Galactal is kind of unconventional in the way that they don't really have a traditional health bar, instead having their remaining health be conveyed through their armor, with a suspiciously shaped eye hole, which breaks off piece by piece as you damage them. And as for their actual attacks, they can slam the ground in order to make crystal patterns pop up and shank you, send meteors flying down, hence the name. And they'll occasionally try to pop out on top of Kirby too, which gives them some nice variety, especially with the way that their attacks kind of change more and more as the fight goes on and their armor breaks. So overall, I think this guy's pretty cool. I would have liked it if we got some new enemies, but at least the new mid-boss we got was pretty sweet. So, I guess now we should talk about those new mouthful modes, huh? Since I brought them up before. Yeah, these mouthful modes are really the final, totally new thing Star-Crossed World has to offer in its main stages, and these are by far my favorite new additions. Springmouth is the first one you'll encounter, being found shortly into the first stage, and this form turns Kirby into a spring, which bounces around, although you can also press A in order to have Kirby perform a super jump to reach new heights, and B, which makes Kirby slam down and also helps with attacking enemies or finding secrets. Springmouth is a form that really excels when it comes to fun platforming and exploration-based challenges, with those strengths really being highlighted in Meteor Shower's arrival, which is mostly based around this ability, and it has you do a ton of things with it, like bouncing around on crystal pillars or these platforms that pull in and out, while also giving you plenty of room to explore, mostly thanks to that one mission that tasks you with finding 5 red starry coins, all placed in high areas atop crystals, which encourages you to just bounce around and see what high and far-off platforms you can reach. Meteor Shower's arrival in general just does a great job introducing the mouthful mode, and all of its subsequent uses are pretty great too, with it being used for a lot of neat platforming obstacle courses here and there, and it even gets a great final section to round out the last stage, the beautifully named Crystal Beast Pack Volcano Battle. Which is just a vertical gauntlet with platforms constantly trying to push you off and crushers trying to smush you, all while you've just got to use Kirby's springy form to bounce over it all in a super exciting climax. And it's only accentuated by the mission here, which requires you to just play it flawlessly, which makes it clear that this is the real final Springmouth test, and it's a great one for sure. It's a great final challenge for a great transformation, because I adore Springmouth and I cannot wait for the inevitable marketable plushie of this guy, as long as they make him, like, stretchy and stuff. If Sine could make Gooey's tongue bend, they can make this guy function like an accordion. Moving on, next up is Gearmouth Kirby, and this one is my favorite new mouthful mode, without a doubt. If you thought Springmouth had a lovably goofy design, you ain't seen nothing yet, and this one allows Kirby to use his new shape to stick to walls, opening up traversal on any and all smooth surfaces, while also giving Kirby access to a dash with B that sends him plowing through enemies, and best of all, it lets you fly off walls. This is all, once again, brilliantly conveyed and expanded upon in Fallen Star Beach, which has you encounter this transformation for the first time, and it perfectly shows off just how much fun it is scaling walls, flying off walls, exploring walls. There's just so many things you can do when you stick to walls, like you can fling yourself onto this wall here. It's a nature sign, it's also lore important, so please remember this. Even beyond its first appearance though, Gearmouth and the sections it's allowed to traverse just never stop being fantastic, with Spinning Dream Parade having one that's super fun with all these moving platforms to scale. There's also this brilliant cannon challenge that has you light a wick with the fire ability before using Gearmouth to scale this whole ass tower before the cannon goes off for a star A. And then there's Moonlight Canyon Labyrinth. Shoutouts to Moonlight Canyon, by the way. Love Moonlight Canyon. Which literally gives Gearmouth a combat section where you fight off hordes of enemies and a Galactol, while also just showing off how much fun the transformation's exploration is, with all the little side areas and secrets you can find off to the sides all the time here. There's like always something you can find just barely off screen. Even in Gearmouth's last showing during Crystal Beast Pack Volcano Battle, void damn why is the name like this. It's pretty fantastic too, with the big challenge being using your wall scaling powers to outrun a rising sea of lava, which is just fun and exciting, and while it's not as explorable as a lot of the other Gearmouth sections, I still love it, and I love Gearmouth. Seriously, best mouthful mode besides Kirby, and I'm dying on that hill. Gearmouth Slender will never ever ever be tolerated on this channel, because Gearmouth is awesome! And last but not least, we've got Signmouth, which is like if Archmouth and Carmouth had a baby. It's got the same general sort of gameplay as Archmouth, with the mouthful automatically moving you forward, on top of also giving you a spin tackle that allows you to get some speed off enemies. But it's mixed with that sense of speed and the land traversal that Carmouth provides. Signmouth gets 3 sections to its name, and every single one is great. The first one's in Frost Street Snow Park, and as with the previous mouthful modes, it's just a beautiful introduction. You start off just sliding around, but you're quickly doing things like hitting starry flowers to open up paths and rewards, doing some light platforming to get you accustomed to the feel of the ability, hitting enemies around for some speed, before doing all that stuff in the climax, where it all just comes together to make an incredibly fun and satisfying slide section that just never gets old no matter how many times I play it. And also, I love sliding around on these slopes here. I really wish they popped up again, they're so fun. But anyway, Signmouth reappears and wastes that count time with its own timed circuit speedway section. And look, do I think that the time limit set for you to beat is just a tiny bit too high? Yeah, absolutely. I conducted dozens of test runs in this area, and literally the only run that ever passed over 1 minute and 5 seconds was the one where I ignored literally every enemy and starry flower, so I can confirm It's literally impossible to mess this up unless you really, really suck or refuse to engage with the design in any way. But putting that one grievance aside, this section is peak. It is probably my favorite sign mouth section in the game. I just love it. It puts more emphasis on raw speed than the other sign mouth sections, and I think that just makes this one really fun. I love going fast with sign mouth, plus the design here is actually pretty nuanced with a fair amount of alternate pathways and some minor cuts you can even spot to shave off like a second doing certain turns. And the best part is, this whole thing is like a circuit speedway section. Your best times are being tracked, so it's just incredibly addicting to go into this loop of restarting and just trying to see how quickly you can go through the whole section again. And I also happen to really enjoy the final sign mouth portion in Crystal Beast Pegful. Wait, hold up. It's actually kind of fire that the wordiest Kirby stage name I think I've ever heard is also the final level of Kirby and the Forgotten Land Nintendo Switch 2 Edition plus Star-Crossed World, which has you doing a lot of platforming over lava, hitting precise spin tackles, and collecting star pieces to pop in a starry for you to collect. It's just a good time, and it embodies everything I enjoyed about the previous two. I guess, minus the more nuanced design of the Waste Circuit Speedway section, although I don't really think that's too big of an issue. This one's going for a more linear style, so I'm cool with it. Still though, Sign Mouth is a lot of fun for its thrilling gameplay and engaging stage design, and it always makes for a nice, fast, and fun change of pace whenever it gets a section. Definitely another one of my favorite Mouthful modes for sure. And those are the 3 new Mouthful modes Star-Crossed World gives us to play around with, and that's also all the explicitly new content, at least in the 12 starry stages anyway. I know, it's not exactly much, but I do think HAL was going for more of a quality over quantity type of deal when it came to these. Because, yeah, sure, there's like 5 new additions, but the catch is, all of them are fantastic. I'm over the moon with them all. They're all so great, and they're just perfect additions to the game. However, Star-Crossed World doesn't need to just rely on new things to succeed, though, since just because you use old ideas and stage elements doesn't mean you can't continue to use them in fun and creative ways. And Star-Crossed World is able to absolutely prove this by building off 3 core pillars of the original game's design in ways that feel fresh and new, despite mostly relying on pre-existing assets and ideas, with those pillars being stage gimmicks, copy abilities, and mouthful modes. For one, we have gimmicks. Good old stage gimmicks. Who doesn't love some gimmicks? I love me a good gimmick. Gimmick 2 video coming sometime in the future, guys. Near future, I promise. Anyways, one of the main things that helps Forgotten Lands' individual stages stand out is, of course, their gimmicks and their unique elements, and Star-Crossed World knows this, so what Star-Crossed World does is it takes those unique elements and does something new with them, something that the original stages didn't, whether it be meshing it with a new edition, or doing something neat and interesting with the idea that just wasn't done before in the base game. I think the first time we really see this sort of design in Star-Crossed World is with the Crystal Tortildings in Meteor Shower's arrival. They're those giant turtles that snap at you and you gotta get on top of them to defeat them. When it came to the Tortilding sections in the base game, they were always about sneaking around with Conemouth Kirby in order to reach the top of the turtles, mostly thanks to Conemouth's limited maneuverability. In Star-Crossed World though, rather than just waddling around between hiding spots, you're using Springmouth, a more active and movement-focused mouthful mode that leads to the design of these sections being a lot more dynamic, since there's less of a set path of events, and they're more about you bouncing around, dodging the Tortilding snaps and making higher ground for yourself in order to reach the top and deal the finishing blow. And this sort of reinventing with stage gimmicks and hazards and even signature enemies like this is something that continues on throughout the expansion, even being complemented well by the game's mission system, just like with this Tortilding encounter, since the last mission of Meteor Shower's arrival requires you to avoid getting hit by any of them. I'm not going to go in-depth on every single instance of Star-Crossed World doing this with the base game's ideas, since at that point it would really just be like an in-depth level-by-level review, because you know, Star-Crossed World does that a lot. But I do want to shed some light on some of my absolute favorite examples of this, including the map puzzle from Lost in Arrival Mall, which is a really clever reworking of the original stage's map puzzles in a way which forces you to use a separate piece of the map you gain access to after defeating the Galactal to deduce where a switch is located rather than determining what the right path to go down is. The use of the parade cars in Spinning Dream Parade, which generally feel a lot wilder than those in the original stage, mostly thanks to their more erratic movements in parts of the stage and their constant overlapping with the main path, and the use of Karoris in Frost Street Snow Park, which I'm stoked to shout out because I love Karori, and it makes me so very happy to see these guys and their snowballs be like the main gimmick of a stage for once, since it felt like they were just swept under the rug in Dreamland 3, and even in Forgotten Land to an extent. With avoiding all their snowballs being required for a mission, and said mission actually being pretty challenging because of all the different Korori formations and all the slopey crystal paths the stage experiments with. These guys absolutely deserved this. This is the Korori stage we needed. Next up, we have the topic of copy ability usage in these stages. And while not every ability necessarily needs to be used in Star-Crossed World for 100%, just about every single one at least gets a use case here or there, with some of them even having the privilege of tying into missions or hidden starry grabs, or at the very least making them a little bit easier. There's not as much detail to go in on here as there was with my stage gimmicks point, but some of my favorite copy ability use instances in Star-Crossed World include the coaster rail portion of Crossing Wandaria, which actually uses its linear railway design in order to make two copy ability options, being Bomb and Needle, super fun and practical to use here. The second Ice Flow ride in Freezing Wind and Some Snowmen, which is all about shooting starry flowers and even a bonus target you can catch off in the distance with the Ranger ability. And best of all, there's the middle section of Fallen Star Beach, which just gives you the tornado ability, and it lets you fly over Knockadiles, which is a big help with a mission, uncover sand piles, which also helps out with another mission, and it even throws in a few more proper tornado challenges, like this little timed bit here you can do to get a starry. On top of the whole thing just flowing really well. I just love what Forgotten Land did with Tornado, and this is just my favorite tornado section in the game now, absolutely. Obviously, there's a ton more copy ability usage than just these instances I mentioned here, but other than that, I don't really have much else to say beyond the fact that I just really have to applaud Star-Crossed World for giving nearly every ability some time to shine. And I just think it's great that Star-Crossed World not only puts more value on all the abilities, but continues to use them in really fun and fresh ways as well. And then that brings me to the last pillar, which is mouthful mode usage. And yeah, obviously there's the new mouthful modes, which yes, do count as an expansion, but I was more referring to moments like this, where it's the old mouthful modes taking the spotlight in some new and creative ways, because Star-Crossed World has a ton of that stuff going on. The first instance of a mouthful mode returning in Star-Crossed World is with Stairs Mouth in Lost in Alivo Mall. And man, words cannot describe how much this section just blew me away when I first experienced it. Stairs Mouth sections in the base game were no stranger to being, creative, to say the least. But they usually have you carry the stairs somewhere so you can, like, press a switch or make a path up to somewhere in the end. And while that's kind of what's going on here, this section is mostly about watching over the set of stairs you're offered, using them to solve puzzles and reach areas that allow you to keep the stairs moving through the section, and in the end, you're ultimately rewarded with a little treasure room and a hidden starry for bringing the stairs this far. It's got a really interesting blend of Stairs Mouth and normal Kirby action that gives this section a feeling unlike any other mouthful mode stretch in the game, and it blew me away seeing the boundaries of this mechanic just be toyed with like this. I mean, even the general idea of needing to keep your mouthful object safe for a reward at the end almost felt like a deconstruction of Forgotten Land's usual design philosophy with mouthful sections, so it was just something to behold. While I feel like the other returning mouthful mode sections don't quite go as crazy as this one, this whole section, either way, lets you know what you're getting into, since Star-Crossed World does stretch a ton of mouthful modes to their limits in some really interesting ways that make these stages stick out when you compare them to those of the base game. I mean, after this, we get a cool secret with Cone Mouth that really pushes the boundaries for Cone Mouth puzzles to complete an obscure mission, a Water Balloon Victory Lap section that has you use Water Balloon Mouth in order to just completely dismantle this obstacle course you needed to traverse to get it in the first place. Ringmouth gets to help out some snowmen who've lost their heads using its blowing abilities. Vending Mouth gets a fun little obstacle course. Ringmouth also gets a neat obstacle course that has you navigating platforms that only stay up as long as these windmills are kept spinning. And of course we get the coolest and most dynamic Carmouth section in the entire game that has you collecting star pieces over crumbling roads and falling buildings, and it's all just so peak. Literally just about every instance of a returning mouthful mode in the starry stages is done incredibly. So much so that even the minor ones like Storage and Dome Mouth kind of have some neat stuff going on, I guess. Granted, not every mouthful mode returns in Star-Crossed World, like Ring Mouth on a boat, or Lightbulb Mouth, which is like a top 5 mouthful mode. I don't even care. 0 out of 10. And some mouthfuls like Scissor Lift and Pipe get some fun, but generally more run-of-the-mill sections. But overall, mouthful mode usage in Star-Crossed World is peak. It's one of Star-Crossed World's strongest attributes between the new and old ones, and it's just used so phenomenally in this whole expansion that I feel like Mouthful Mode has really cemented itself as one of the finest gimmicks the series has ever seen. If it wasn't already there with Forgotten Land, it's for sure reached that point with Star-Crossed World. And also, as a little bonus, just the cherry on top of all of this, Star-Crossed World stages are just as secret-rich as the original games, even if there's really only, like, one secret that comes close to being on the same level as the Concrete Isles Whirlpool Room or the Wastes Where Life Began Hotel. And I feel like this secret-rich quality is able to really shine thanks to the collectathon-type missions Star-Crossed World has from time to time, with Fallen Star Beach in particular being loaded with secret alcoves to accommodate for its 7 hidden treasures. And that's really just scratching the surface when it comes to how many little nooks and crannies these stages have. And this one's important for the lore, so please remember this. Even including some little areas that are totally optional for 100%, and some obscure blue starry coins too, plus that aforementioned secret on par with some of the game's best, that being the Howl Room, because yeah, we got a new one, and it's awesome. It's by far my favorite secret in any of the Starry stages, although I will keep my lips sealed if anyone watching has not found it and wants to seek it out for themselves. It's worth it. It's not that difficult to track down. It's easier than that 86 one in Return to Dreamland Deluxe. You just gotta do some exploring. There's zero waiting involved. It's absolutely worth finding though, because the room looks gorgeous with the crystal letters, and the music is a banger. It's absolutely worth just sticking around for a few minutes to hear the full track, since it's pretty lengthy for a song that plays in a room you can clear out in like less than a minute. And speaking of looking pretty and sounding good, how's Star-Crossed World's presentation overall? Ooh, clean segue. But first, I got a plug. I need your attention. And if you want to help, all you gotta do is let me know your favorite Starry stage down in the comments, because I want retention. But more importantly than that, I want to start something of a discussion, or at least I want to see how we're feeling about the Starry stages. I just want to gauge the general consensus like I always do. Star-Crossed World is still pretty new, so looking for opinions on this kind of stuff is actually like kind of impossible at the moment. There isn't even like a favorite Starry stage discussion thread on Reddit, and everything's on Reddit, so you know it's pretty bleak. So help a curious guy out in more ways than one by telling me your favorite Starry stage down below, and in turn, I'll tell you my favorite Starry stage, even if it is pretty obvious, in 3, 2, 1. It's Fallen Star Beach. I'm sorry, Moonlight Canyon Labyrinth. You're only the second best. I love you, but you just don't have the same flow. You don't have the same amount of collectibles. You don't have all the hidden alcoves. Your presentation is a hair weaker. Presentation. We were talking about presentation, right? Okay. Back to your regularly scheduled Pekachow. The stage environments in Star-Crossed World aren't really anything new, so there's not really much to say on a visual or aesthetic front, since it's mostly just as excellent as the base game in that regard. But still, I do gotta give the visual presentation credit for how much HAL was actually able to nail giving certain stages a different vibe, and for all the little things they added here and there, of course. Something Star-Crossed World does quite often is take a stage from the base game and give it a more destroyed, run-down look, to be a little more in line with the meteor shower that just struck the entire New World here, and I think HAL especially nailed giving off those more ruined vibes in stages like Lost in Alivo Mall and Wastes That Count Time, with the former really feeling like a further decaying version of the already decaying Alivo Mall, with you entering through a broken window that leads straight into a crumbling upper floor with shots of the devastation on the lower floors below, and the latter taking the whole open area from the stage it's based on and modifying it with some details here and there that really make everything feel more ruined, like having the once moving platforms be out of commission, or having the ship's cargo be knocked over to create a little small area in the back of it. Star-Crossed World also likes to further emphasize the destruction of its stages through the presence of things like these giant crystal meteors, which look absolutely stunning and can be found all over the place, really enhancing the expansion's admittedly light story. And speaking of beautiful crystals, areas affected by starry flowers look absolutely gorgeous. So much so to the point where I don't even know how to put this into words. You just gotta look at this yourself. Now, I've got no clue what in the world the graphics people were doing in the dev room or whatever, but if they were aiming to make the prettiest looking crystal texture I think I've ever seen, oh, I think they can rest assured knowing they absolutely nailed it. They absolutely did. Also, shoutouts to Spinning Dream Parade for somehow looking even more stunning than the original. Although I guess that's just what happens when you mix the prettiest stage from the original game with pretty crystal textures. You get this, and it's beautiful. I just cannot get enough of looking at this. It's just so pretty. Star-Crossed World also just loves getting super cinematic as well. Even in just the 12 Starry stages, there's plenty of things I could point to, like the opening to Meteor Shower's arrival, the breathtaking view of Wendaria up on the roller coaster tracks and crossing Wendaria, buildings toppling over and crumbling fiery Forbidden Lands that actually become stage elements, and by far my personal favorite, the opening to Fallen Star Beach, of course, because what else would it be? I'm sorry, Moonlight Canyon Labyrinth, where a meteor crashes into the ocean, parts the sea for Kirby like he's Jesus Christ or something, and opens up the beautiful looking seafloor for him to explore after the water freezes up into crystal. There is a reason they flexed this scene so much in the trailers, because they knew they were cooking. They cooked. And you know who else was cooking? The composers, because sweet merciful void, if Forgotten Land didn't have one of the best Kirby soundtracks before somehow, it surely does now. If I had to describe Star-Crossed Worlds OST in one word, it would probably be experimental. And when I say that, I'm saying we got Roche Limit violins and choir singing in the first level. I'm saying Wandaria sounds like this now. The craziest thing is that this actually makes sense in lore. But then again, what doesn't in Kirby? I'm saying we got chiptune, in-your-face EDM in a Kirby game. Yeah, this isn't your grandpa's Kirby soundtrack. Star-Crossed World will literally leave you on the edge of your seat wondering what in the world the next stage's remix will sound like, thanks to how much the composers just really went wild with the soundtrack this time. And this fact has really helped, because Star-Crossed World has the wonderful Shogo Sakai and Megumi Ohara finally return, or debut in Ohara's case, to compose some stuff for a mainline entry, as well as bringing in the new talent of Yuki Kato, on top of having the base game's composers all return to do some more tracks too. Star-Crossed World has some stellar variety in composers, and the blend of all their musical styles in this one soundtrack, on top of just the sheer variety in the genres and types of songs they create, really does cement the Star-Crossed World OST as something truly special. And I won't go into detail on every single song here, but some of my absolute favorites, at least as far as the stage remixes go to avoid any, significant spoilers for now, include Spinning Dream Parade, the aforementioned chiptune in-your-face EDM sounding version of the Wandaria Dream Parade by Jun Ishikawa, Frost Street Snow Park and Twinkling Skating Rink, which are a beautiful pair of Northeast Frost Street remixes by Yuki Shimuka and Megumi Ohara, which nail the festive winter vibe. Lost in Alivo Mall, an excellent ominous remix of the Alivo Mall theme that has Shogo Sakai just written all over it. Actually, no, seriously. Someone pointed out to me that this sounds just like the Mother 3 attic music, and I cannot unhear it. Moonlight Canyon Labyrinth, of course, because it's Moonlight Canyon. And it's not just Moonlight Canyon. It's a Kirby Cafe-style remix by Ohara, and while it's not on the same level of the original, it's still incredible, and I really like the unique vibe it brings to its titular stage. It just really fits. It wasn't exactly what I was expecting for a Moonlight Canyon remix, but I am absolutely okay with this. It's a banger. And then there's without a doubt my favorite new remix of the bunch. Say it with me, everyone. If anything's better than Moonlight Canyon Labyrinth, it's Fallen Star Beach. But seriously, this is a promising first taste of what Yuki Kato has to bring to the table, and it just sounds absolutely incredible, and that climax before the song loops is so good. It literally took my breath away the first time I heard it, and it still keeps doing that all these listens later. It's an absolutely gorgeous track, and I love it so much. Of course, I also want to give Star-Crossed World's main theme a shout out as well, that being Twinkling Star Showers from our favorite mysterious singer, Nachel. I'll refrain from mentioning the deeper meaning or lore behind the song for now, but this song perfectly encapsulates what makes the Star-Crossed World OST so special, so perfectly, that I just need to give it a mention. It has the same sort of ethereal, beautiful sound a lot of the Star-Crossed World OST goes for, but at the same time, it's just unlike any other Kirby song with how much it bounces around, and how it even goes kind of crazy around the middle. It's just this sort of unpredictability and variety in this one song that defines the greater Star-Crossed World OST. And also, having this song be like the new Welcome to the New World, where its motifs are hidden somewhere in half the OST's other tracks, also gives the whole thing this sort of cohesion Forgotten Land also used to great effect. The Star-Crossed World OST is just brilliant overall, and having Twinkling Star Showers be at the center of all of it is just absolutely poetic. It's just the icing on the delicious, warm cake. Oh, and I almost forgot to mention the new EX figures before we wrap up here. Because, yeah, Star-Crossed World blessed us with 2 new sets of gacha figures to collect, coming in 2 new volumes known as EX Volume 1 and 2. These are sets consisting of 43 figures each, giving us a grand total of And they're just like the gacha figures in the base game in that you can find capsules containing a random figure in the starry stages, or you can also gamble in Waddle Dee Town if you want to get them all. Although rather than getting these from a traditional gacha machine, you instead get them from Astronomer Waddle Dee, who moves into Waddle Dee Town after you clear the first 2 starry stages and begins handling the gacha machine EX. And I'll talk more about these later when we get to the post-game stuff, since, you know, collecting these is really more of a post-game activity, and also, lore. Figure lore. So just keep these in the back of your mind for now. And I guess while we're in Waddle Dee Town, this guy's also here too. He's Starry Guide Waddle Dee, and he's your guy if you're struggling to track down a certain Starry and don't want to use Google for whatever reason. Although, I'm kind of an epic Kirby gamer, so I didn't really need his help. Or Google, for that matter. Make no mistake, though, I respect the businessman, even if I never really used it. I'm sure it helped little Timmy out. It's a good thing we got guys like this out here guiding the Timmies of tomorrow. And that is the bulk of Star-Crossed World. Just 12 straight stages of HAL firing on all cylinders, with fantastic stage designs, brilliant uses and expansions of Forgotten Lands ideas and mechanics, visuals that somehow managed to be even more stunning than those of the base game, and a phenomenal soundtrack on top of all of that. And so, this just leaves us with the final boss at the Fallen Star Volcano and everything that comes after. So, spoiler warning for what's ahead for anyone who's still sticking around and somehow doesn't know what happens here, because we're gonna go right on in, right about now. Kirby and Elfilin have done it. They've gathered all the starries necessary to seal the Star of Darkness back up, which is apparently 80 at minimum according to Wii Kirby, which I didn't know because I just 100%ed the stages as I went along on both of my playthroughs because, you know, Epic Kirby Gamer's gonna Epic Kirby Game. And right as the final 3 starries finish off the Meteor's seal, it breaks for some reason. And just as the starry seal shatters to the meteor's power, this void terminal looking thing emerges and it begins to take in all the loose starries Fecto Forgo style, one by one. Although 3 starries are able to escape from the creature's grasp and flee towards this crystal platform, and just as Kirby and Elfilin are about to follow, the ground beneath Kirby gives way, thrusting him into a little pre-boss room before the final showdown. And this seriously might be the absolute pinnacle of Kirby pre-boss rooms, which I realize isn't saying much, but the atmosphere and the storytelling, surprisingly, are incredibly strong here. So, Kirby finds himself in this underground tunnel, which is pretty standard barring the excellent atmosphere and lighting, until Kirby sets foot into this sort of hangar-looking area. And in this area, there's loads of discarded machinery, huge rails, prototype spaceships, and even nature billboards, interestingly enough. I'd be a fool to not also make note of the music here too, which is this track called Prescient Stirring Fa Lu Wa song. And what this one is it's essentially a spiritual successor to the certified banger known as Eternal Echo of the Thrilling Tour. That mashes together sound clips from Nature's 2 big songs, audio clips from the Dream Discoveries Tour voiceover in all sorts of different languages, and strangest of all, excerpts from Welcome to Wandaria and Circuit Speedway, with each and every last one of these things sounding beautifully distorted and eerie to create a perfectly ominous final boss build-up track that leaves you with more than just a few questions. Now, what exactly these spaceships and Wandaria and Nature have to do with any of this, I'll get to in due time, but just know, once those connections are revealed, this room hits like a bombshell. It's seriously some awesome environmental storytelling, even if it makes like little to no sense on your first time through unless you somehow cracked the lore beforehand, which, no you didn't. Nobody is on the same wavelength as HAL Laboratories' creative team when it's time to come up with new Kirby lore. But that's enough about that, let's get back on topic. At the end of this long tunnel is a final starry flower for Kirby to pop, which opens up the path to the final boss, littered with all the abilities you could wish for, and a crystal elevator right at the end to take us to the final showdown. So let's waste no more time and see who or what awaits. And I still think it's going to be Galactonite, by the way. I mean, what's even the point of having all these allusions to, like, crystal imprisonment and having a new mid-boss called Galactal? That's Galacta with an L, which isn't what this is going to be, because this is going to be a Galacta W. We're going to get Galactonite in here, and oh, that's just Fecto Elfilis's unseen evil brother. Wait, what? Yeah, I'm sure this was not on anyone's bingo card. Meet General Median Elfilis, titled Parastella Crystallis. And no, you are not the only one whose brain fried up trying to read this splash screen for the first time, or at least I hope not, because that happened to me. This guy is in fact Fecto Elfilis's older brother, and he's got as crazy a name as he does a design. Like, seriously, look at this guy. Just when I thought we couldn't go any harder than Chaos Elfilis, it happened. But That's enough about that. This here is the big final boss battle to cap off Star-Crossed World's main story, so how's the fight? Well, the first phase of the fight is excellent. The stage is excellently set with the absolutely gorgeous arena being the aforementioned crystal platform above the Fallen Star volcano, which just gives off this perfect feeling of finality while also giving the devs one more chance to just flex that absolutely gorgeous crystal texture. And General takes a lot of cues from his sibling, with many of his moves having some sort of Fecto-Elphalus equivalent, although General manages to be a lot tougher for one major reason, and it's all those spiny crystals that just pop out of the ground after he does, like, literally anything. These crystals not only extend the radius of his attacks, but they linger for a bit as well, even keeping any dropped stars from you for just the slightest bit longer. And all of that is already enough to make this stuff a bit of a nuisance, but I'd say that the biggest sin of these crystals is that they make dodging backwards under any circumstance a death sentence, and I love this design choice. Dodging backwards is usually the safest option in any given fight because it lets you activate Kirby's Witch Time ability while also being able to get away and keep distance from your opponent. So I think this detail of Genmol essentially locking you into close quarters, forcing you to dodge left or right, actually adds a lot, not only to the fight's challenge, but to the atmosphere, and to Genmol's character as Elphalus's older brother. And yes, I realize I'm not calling him Median Elphalus to match Elphalus, but Genmol is just too funny. I'm not passing up the chance to call this guy Genmol, like, ever. I mean, he's literally the older brother of an already formidable and invasive alien being, which just serves to make his name even funnier, but it also makes the whole fight just make even more sense between the beefed up attacks and his enforcement of close combat, and his generally more vicious and barbaric demeanor you can see through things like his animations compared to his sibling, which feels like a constant throughout the fight. Although I think it radiates the most off of probably my favorite of his moves, which is the one where he just takes his spear and tries to slam it down into Kirby, which just goes so crazy. It's a cold move, but it best embodies what Genmol's all about, I'd say. Once Genmol's lost a little over half his health though, it's clear he's had it, and he absorbs the arena's light, turning it from a luminous, crystalline battlefield to a dull gray one that's caught in an intense storm, which still manages to look absolutely stunning, by the way. They killed it with the presentation here. And he begins to rush Kirby down with this Gemini attack, where he creates clones of himself to charge at Kirby before he follows, and after about 3 rounds of that, he retreats into his defensive meteor, which is this giant crystal shield he seals himself in. Welcome back, Galactonite. That can either be smashed with an ability or by using meteors that rain down on the outside, lest it blow up into an explosion that takes up almost the entire arena. From there though, the rest of the fight plays out pretty similarly to the first phase, with some attacks being changed up a little here and there, and he also has this laser attack that I always fall into. It's kind of a pain. But eventually, Genbol falls, or I guess he flies off, because he's not done yet. And in a fit of desperation, Genbol begins to absorb not just more light, but the entire surrounding area of Kirby's platform. And then suddenly, it's that spoilery thumbnail on all those Final Boss Plus ending videos. Nah, but seriously, this phase transition is awesome. I love the buildup of Genbol's hands climbing onto Kirby's platform as he shows off his new, enlarged form, and the whole phase that follows is excellent too. But before I get to that, I gotta gush about the music for a second, because Genbol's boss theme named The Falling Star Now Pierces Through the Lagrange Point, Sing of Radiant Thea, a wordy but awesome theme for the wordy but awesome final boss of a wordy but awesome game. Talk about poetic. But that absolutely metal name aside, Lagrange Point, as I'll just call it for short, is a legendary final boss theme by my guy Hirokazu Ando, with different sections corresponding to each phase of the fight. And it all comes together in this beautiful 9-minute package, which makes it like the longest Kirby song we've ever gotten, and really, I think you're better off listening to it yourself than hearing it explained in depth, at least by me, because there's a lot going on here, and my non-existent comprehension of music theory would make that kind of a crap show. Although I still want to briefly touch on these themes because I just love them so much, and we'll go through them phase by phase, although we're going to save phase 3 for a little later. But phase 1 is an incredible orchestral piece that makes some great use of all these motifs from Nachel's songs, and surprisingly the Wendaria Dream Parade, I can hear a little bit of that in there too. That just sounds so ethereal and otherworldly, while also blending its exciting and intense portions really well, and it just has this absolutely heavenly intro that just gives me chills every single time. It's so good. While Phase 2 sounds a lot more grand in comparison, taking on a much slower pace while some choir vocals and guitars mix in with the orchestral sounds, really highlighting the spectacle of the whole fight with the now giant Genwol, while also featuring the Song of Supplication motif from Star Allies. Alright, I'm sure this could be useful for a crackpot theory later down the line. It's also bridged into from the first phase by an excellently ominous organ version of the primary Twinkling Star Showers motif, and I can't get over how incredibly done this whole section is. It's just the cherry on top of such a peak transition. As I alluded to earlier, there's a bit more of the song we'll get to, but for now, let's just see what surprises Phase 2 has in store. And spoilers, there's a lot, because unlike the first phase, which was like a remixed version of Effecto-Elphalus fight, this one here is just about totally fresh from the ground up, mostly thanks to the fact that there is no fight in the base game that even comes close to having this kind of scale. And while it's not as mind-blowingly gorgeous as the first phase, the environment here still looks stunning, with the very muted and dark sky and central platform really complementing the dark reds and the glow of Genwol himself. And speaking of him, I love how intimidating the very fixed camera of this fight makes him, having him at the perfect angle to just tower over Kirby to really sell just how menacing he is in this colossal form. Where the fun of this fight really lies, though, is in Genwol's new arsenal of attacks, however, as literally every single one of his attacks is just so much fun to dodge and play along with. Let's see what we got here. There's an awesome looking move that has Genwol turning his hands into crystalline swords to swing at Kirby. There's one where he sends out a series of energy blades from the distance that leave crystal needles in their wake. There's one move that has Genwol call upon some Galactals to pop out from below Kirby to attack, which also kind of reveals that the Galactals master that was alluded to in their figure description is Genwol, although I'm still on that Galactan Knight copium. Just because they're in cahoots with Genwol doesn't mean Galacta doesn't have something to do with this. They're Galacta's followers. Trust me, I made this up. Then we got another attack where Genwol slams his hand onto the central platform, which creates these energy waves that angle to Kirby's current position. One where Genwol flings a set of crystals from his tail before slamming it down to create shockwaves that are conducted by the aforementioned crystals. And last, but absolutely not least, there's that insane move where Genwol literally plucks a building through a portal and swings it around in an attempt to crush Kirby, followed by a classic debris storm, of course. And with that, I just went over every single move Genwol has in this phase in basically no time at all. And I realize that on paper, this doesn't exactly seem like the most adequate or fleshed out final boss moveset ever, although there is one key thing I purposely left out about this phase so far, and it's the thing that I'd say makes this as fun as it is, and that's the fact that as Genwol's health gets lower and lower, each one of his attacks gets more elaborate and crazy. Yeah, rather than having the usual transition most Kirby bosses go through around like half health, something that even the last phase was doing, Giant Genwol here is just one straight fight with no room to breathe, and attacks are just constantly scaling to how low his health gets, with every one of his attacks having a more difficult variant or two. And when I say some of these harder variants of his moves get crazy, I mean it. The difference between the basic and strongest versions of his moves are like night and day. I mean, look at how the Energy Blade attack comes out when he uses it early to how it comes out later. Or look at how many more Galactals he sends out by the end and how much more relentless they are when it comes to chasing Kirby down. It's that feeling of watching these moves grow throughout the fight, while also having the pleasure of avoiding them, that makes this fight so incredible in my eyes. It's got variety, the presentation is on point, and the idea is something that's actually pretty unique for a Kirby boss, all things considered. And all in all, this second phase is just a perfect follow-up to the first, and a very pleasant surprise as well. However though, the fight isn't over yet, as Kirby still has yet to defeat the true enemy who was right in front of our noses the whole time. It's that red ball thing stuck in Genwol's horns, also known as Genwol's core, which looks suspiciously like Dark Mind for some reason. So, ignoring that for now, this third and final phase of the fight has Genwol's core seal itself inside a crystal, much like Genwol was doing back in the first phase, except now, the whole point of the fight has shifted to being all about breaking through the crystal barriers their core constantly puts up around itself. And at first, it's pretty straightforward. You just gotta dodge the meteors and take in the stars they drop to chip away at the core, although once you break through the shield, it goes back up, and Genwell starts calling upon enemies and slamming into the ground as well, which leads into the grand finale, a chaotic phase where galactals are being called in, and there's more slamming on Genwell's part, and there's even some huge meteors that come in to create these massive shockwaves. It's awesome, but before long, Genwell's crystal barrier breaks once again, and it leaves the core open for punishment, so Kirby can just wail on this thing until it goes down. And honestly, this whole segment is short, but it's super sweet. It's kind of like those extra flashy final boss phases most modern Kirby final bosses tend to have, although this one definitely sticks out from the crowd for playing more like your usual Kirby action, and also for sparing my thumbs. But regardless, the escalation of this fight and the pressure you feel to hurry and beat the core once you notice they're charging up in admittedly pretty easy to dodge attack makes this fight something so special. And I didn't even touch the music. Man, the music here is just something else. This is the crown jewel of an already amazing final boss theme. Phase 3 of Lagrange Point really kicks up the tempo, especially coming off the slower paced second phase, and it's got all the energy to match, toning down the orchestral qualities a bit to focus more on the guitar and the choir, and said choir also happens to sound pretty similar to the one from Fatal Blooms in Midnight from Triple Deluxe. And that right there is just scratching the surface of all the crazy motifs and references to other Kirby songs in this one track, which feels insane to say because Forgotten Land was just so reserved when it came to using old motifs and stuff like this. Even in Star-Crossed World, it was super reserved. And when I say it's crazy, I mean it in the best way possible. This song is a treat. We've got nods to The World to Win and Settling a Score, which connects this home stretch of a final boss fight to other home stretches of final boss fights from previous games. There's a little bit of a New Wind for Tomorrow and Green Greens in there to really hammer in Kirby's triumph over Genwell. And craziest of all, there's Otherworldly Warrior, Galactonite's theme, in this song. So in a way, Galactonite was in the final boss fight. I was right! I called it! But seriously, this is awesome, and why is Hal throwing so much more fuel onto the Galactonite fire? Are they gonna answer this soon? Please answer this soon. We have so many loose threads, please just let him do something cool. But yeah, that's Star-Crossed World's final boss, and I just cannot put into words how incredible it is. It's just like the Starry stages, it's just Hal pouring all their effort and firing on all cylinders in this one boss fight just to make it as spectacular as it can possibly be. And it absolutely paid off because the visuals are stunning, the music is incredible, and I feel like this fight, more so than any other one in the game, really just highlights how much of a grasp Hal already has on designing excellent 3D Kirby bosses, because everything about this was just perfect. The challenging but fresh Alphaless remix of the first phase, the giant, new, and exhilarating second phase, and of course the sheer adrenaline rush that is the third phase, all just come together to create something truly special, and dare I say it, this is easily up there as one of the best final bosses I think we've ever seen. But with all that said and Genwell's third and final phase taken care of, his core blows up, restoring the fallen star volcano back to normal, and freeing all of the absorbed Starries, who take the remains of Genwell and seal them up in the meteor's shell. The Starries then all head off back to space as Kirby and Elfilin watch on, with Elfilin remarking that he might have been wrapped in the embrace of the Starry's light in the distant past, before Kirby and Elfilin look on at the now clear skies, watching as shooting stars soar out into the distance. And roll credits, now featuring the vocal version of Twinkling Star Showers. And I already talked about, like, the composition and vibe of the song, I guess, before, so I won't go into that again here. But these credits here provide us a proper translation of what exactly Nachel is saying in the song, and there's quite a few interesting things here and there. A lot of the lyrics tie into the meteor legend, kind of just restating certain things we already knew from the intro, like how meteors have fallen in the New World's past, and how the Starries are like the Star Children and protectors. But there's just something about the way the song uses terms like birth, and how it brings up questions like light or dark, that really makes me feel like the sealed meteor's heart shape is not a coincidence, and that this is an obvious Jamba Heart parallel. I mean, we got a giant crystalline heart blowing up into all these, like, light and dark pieces, like, come on. And of course there's a giant purple blobby thing inside that also happens to have a dark matter, or a dark mind looking form as well. And that's not even getting into the Japanese version, which has a few little things that didn't really carry over into the localization, like Nachel explicitly using the term Children of the Stars, which is a term found on one of Void Termina's pause screen descriptions, or the line, "Tonight, darkness or light, whose birthday will it be?" which reminds me an awful lot of a certain other Kirby character with a connection to a giant crystalline heart that also happened to mention birthdays one time. I'm not going to come out and make any definitive conclusions yet, mostly because I don't really know how to conclude something like this. I feel like we really need more info. But all I'm saying is, these two giant crystal hearts are probably connected in some way, but maybe that's just me. Additionally, there's also a few other neat little things going on with Twinkling Star Showers, like how the localization team worked in a little nod to the intro cutscene by incorporating Jewel Storm, which is the cutscene's name, into the lyrics, which is also done in Japanese with the cutscene's name being Squall of Jewels, and how the Japanese version also mentions time revolving, which is a concept very closely associated with Galactonite. So, Twinkling Star Showers is just really neat, although there is a bit of concrete lore I haven't quite touched on yet, but I suppose that's all the more reason to wrap this review up by diving into the 100% completionist post-game stuff that Star-Crossed World has to offer. Heading back into the game after finishing Star-Crossed World unlocks two new things around Waddle Dee Town, with the first one being self-explanatory. It's just a little upgrade to the Waddle Live corner stage that adds Star-Crossed World songs, so more Fallen Star Beach for me, yippee! But the other thing is the Ultimate Cup ZEX, a new cup you can enter at the Coliseum that's like the Soul Melter EX to the Ultimate Cup Z's Soul Melter, if I had to describe it simply. It's the new, harder, Ultimater boss rush added after launch, and how is it? Well, for the most part, it's pretty similar to the Ultimate Cup Z, at least in terms of its boss roster. Besides the obvious inclusion of General Median Elphalus, who shows up as the new 12th round boss here, the only new opponents per se come in the forms of the two upgraded mid-boss gauntlets, with each mid-boss having been upgraded into their crystal form, and both rounds having a Galactal fight sandwiched in between both of the regular mid-bosses. As for everyone else, well, they're the same guys from the Ultimate Cup Z, including Morphonite, disappointingly, as I was really hoping for, like, a Morphonite EX palette swap or something. I mean, Star Allies did it in Soul Melter EX, it's only fair to expect it from its Forgotten Land equivalent, right? The thing with these refights, though, is that while your opponents are familiar, their patterns are anything but, and as someone who's got the Ultimate Cup Z down to muscle memory, oh, this threw me for a loop. I got absolutely trashed on my first run. Even putting my perspective aside, though, I do think Hal did a great job at making this cup feel a lot more difficult than the vanilla version. And while I won't go too deep into these refights, I do want to commend Hal for doing more with less here, as they really were able to create a different feeling and more challenging cup, just by doing things like giving bosses attacks that they'd usually get later on, earlier in the fight, and by dismantling the usual conventions you've come to associate with certain variants of bosses, like how this Phantom Silly-Dillo here uses his rolling and Sandstorm moves phases earlier than any other Silly-Dillo fight in the game, just to really toy with your expectations and throw you off. As I said, Hal was doing more with less here, and while it would have been cool if we were fighting, like, new crystal variants instead of almost exclusively the Phantoms again, that one aesthetic thing is really my only critique here, as when you look past the recycled forms and appearances, the Ultimate Cup ZEX really is a fresh challenge that'll put your Forgotten Land skills to the test in a way anything in the base game just didn't do. And a big reason for that is the final showdown, the fabled 13th round the Cup's been hyping up from the very beginning, and it's the legendary match with the species born of chaos. No, the Lord of Chaos, Chaos Elphalus, wielding General Median Elphalus's spear, and also their 4 new shiny crystals. I know it sounds underwhelming on paper, but trust me, this is awesome. Although I did kind of want an Elphalus, Median Elphalus double team, just to fill the double Chaos Elphalus-sized hole in my heart. Rest in peace, Hammerglow. At first, this fight feels pretty similar to its base game counterpart, with really the only new thing coming from the crystals that occasionally shoot down at Kirby between Elphalus's attacks. Although as the fight goes on, we see more unique variations of Elphalus's attacks that help the fight stick out and make it feel more like a proper upgrade, with moves like this one that makes Elphalus's portal lasers move around, or this take on Elphalus's regeneration move that has the crystals occasionally shoot down at Kirby in a way that adds to the fight rather than just feeling tacked on. Elphalus also has some pretty sweet new moves moves here and there as well, like this move where the camera switches to a top-down angle as they send sharp crystals flying across the screen through these portals. Or this one here that has Alpha's litter spiked crystals all around the room before following it up with another attack that's made even trickier to dodge thanks to the hazard-ridden arena. Overall, there isn't really that much to say about the first phase of the new Chaos Alphalus fight. It's just a really solid remix of the original fight that seems a tad underwhelming at first, absolutely raw splash screen title change aside, but it absolutely kills it when it comes to integrating its sole new addition and spicing up a familiar fight in a very interesting way. The real star of the show here, however, is of course the second phase with Alphalus's core. This phase got such an exciting shakeup, and it's evident the moment the boss makes its first move, with said move being this attack that has the core create these copies of the Beast Pack that unleash one of their signature moves back to back. The craziest thing though is that this is just scratching the surface of how insane this new fight with Chaos Alphalus's core gets, as just in the first half alone, Alphalus is using crystals to refract and split its lasers into these crazy patterns, and trying to suck you in via black hole while moving around and leaving laser pulses in its wake. And it gets even better when the second half hits. I mean, you got the deadly Sun Gazer attack, which has been reworked to incorporate starry flowers interestingly enough, while also having you use the platforms they make in a really interesting way that forces you to use them as protection against Alphalus's scorching heat. You got Alphalus splitting into more clones, which all create these shockwaves that require some great timing to jump or dodge across thanks to these tornadoes here. And there's even a moment where Alphalus splits into these little elemental eyeball creatures that just do different things depending on how they look. Al just loves their Drossia Soul references, huh? And it's all just insane, and I haven't even mentioned the new remix Two Planets Approach the Roche Limit received here. It's an awesome remix that takes the original song and spruces it up with some fresh choir vocals and stuff all over the place, and it succeeds at making the fight feel more grand and really selling you on the fact that you're fighting what's essentially both of the Alphalus siblings at once. The second phase even gets some sick distorted parts here and there that are just a trip to hear with headphones, and we even get a new pre-Deadly Sun Gazer song in the form of Eternally Stirring Fa Lua song, which caps off the trilogy of eerie, distorted Alphalus associated tracks, and it really wants to let you know that this, the Lord of Chaos, is in fact the ultimate life form. Welcome back, and here we are. This whole fight is insanely creative, over the top, and it's pretty challenging as well, since I actually died like 2 or 3 times to this thing before besting it. Was that because I was adamant on making my first victory a copy ability-less one? Yeah, otherwise I probably would have mopped the floor with them on my first try with this guy. But difficulty be damned, this secret fight is amazing, and if Genwell's fight wasn't already proof enough of Hal's finesse when it comes to crafting excellent 3D boss fights, look no further than right here. So let's finish the Lord of Chaos off, and just like with the original Ultimate Cub Z, we get a cutscene here that plays out very similarly to the one that plays at the end of the regular Ultimate Cub Z, with Chaos Alphalus being defeated once and for all, although this time they poof into a bunch of little starries here, and Alphalin absorbs the last part of their life energy into himself, serving as a way for Alphalin to kind of make peace with his other half, and I guess thanks to the Ultimate Cub ZEX, now he's able to do it with his brother as well. And that's the Ultimate Cub ZEX done, and now that we're finished with it, wait, did he just say the thing? And now that we're finished with it, we can get paid, get some rare stones, although you should 100% be getting more than 3 for just doing this. And we get a special figure known as Invasive Species from Distant Stars, which looks cool and acts as the first in-game mention of Alphalus and Genwell's relationship, and confirms that the whole reason behind Genwell's invasion was that he saw Alphalus fail to invade the New World and went, nuh-uh. I'm gonna do it better. It warms my heart to see such an accurate portrayal of the sibling experience in my Kirby game. But since we're on the topic of figures now, what better time to finish up Star-Crossed World by doing all that's left to do for 100% completion by getting them all. Obviously, you can use stages to grind for these if you wish to do that for some reason, but for us normal people, we've got Astronomer Waddle Dee in the center of Waddle Dee Town, who I already mentioned before is in charge of the Gacha Machine EX for EX Volumes 1 and 2. So let's waste no time and get as many as we can. 150 Starry Coins. 250 Starry Coins. You know what, I think I'm going back to pick up the stray capsules and the stages after all. I'll be right back. Yeah, I'm not gonna sugarcoat it. These are some crazy prices considering how much less prominent Starry Coins are compared to the regular Star Coins, and I mean, yeah, there isn't really much else you can buy with them, but like, this inflation is insane. This is 1.5 times the cost of a regular Volume 4 figure. What is this? Real life? I'm just saying there absolutely should have been a more efficient way to farm these things beyond just replaying stages with gacha prices this high. But on the bright side, there's only 86 figures to collect, and slightly less if you only count the ones you can actually pull from the gacha, as just like in the base game, there's a few figures you can get through other means. We've got 3 of them this time around, including the aforementioned invasive species from distant stars, which you get for completing the Ultimate Cup ZEX for the first time, the Planet Protector Starries figure you get for rescuing all 120 Starries throughout the Starry stages, and there's one more, although it's like a Star-Crossed World 100% reward, so I'll go into that one a little later. So just keep that in the back of your mind for a little while longer. And as for the other 83 figures, I think they're pretty cool, although I do feel like they were a little more concerned with hitting a certain number quota than representing Star-Crossed World, if I'm being totally honest. I mean, there's a crazy amount of random object figures and only a handful of the crystal enemies depicted here, which is kind of weird. And also there's no Crystal Karori figure, so I don't really know what we're doing here. The priorities with these new figures don't feel clear at all, but I feel like at that point I'm just kind of nitpicking. I'm just looking for problems. And besides, generally weird figure selection aside, we do get a ton of really sick-looking figures, especially in Volume 2, that have nothing to do with Star-Crossed World, but still look awesome and feel like they're celebrating the game's legacy in a sense by capturing so many different things and moments the base game's figures never quite got around to. Not much else to say here on the figures themselves. I've got my nitpicks, but I'm definitely satisfied with the 2 new sets we got, and they were as fun to collect as usual. Inflated prices aside. So, remember figure lore? I haven't touched on that much. So before we close out this review here and hit that glorious 100%, here is the figure lore lightning. According to the pair of Twinkling Star Shower sign figures, Nachel had a breakthrough in a dream which helped her decipher the ancient poem of the meteor legend passed down throughout the New World civilization, which led her to use the legend as influence while writing Twinkling Star Showers. The song released the same day the people of the New World took off, playing on the ship they used and throughout the hangar they departed from, even to this day, as we can see below the Fallen Star volcano. Additionally, we also learn that Nachel was among the portion of the New Worlders who stayed behind in the New World after their departure as well. Speaking of, this figure depicts a prototype of the spaceship New World, the very ship that the New Worlders used to leave their home, while the description here tells us that Wandaria actually had an ulterior motive behind its design all along, with the park's space theming actually being used as a way to get the New Worlders used to this idea of space travel, with Nachel's songs being used for a similar comforting purpose, which kind of explains why Wandaria's motifs were all over the songs in the climax, and also that little Ferris wheel Easter egg I pointed out much earlier. This prototype also looks super similar to the cockpit of the Lore Starcutter, implying that yes, the New Worlders may in fact be the Ancients, or at least the technologically savvy ones. As for the Starries, there's a bit of a Dark Nebula as the ruler of the underworld type of mistranslation here, with a localized description mentioning them having some sort of home planet that's never even implied to exist in the original Japanese. But otherwise, everything else is pretty accurate, with their figure descriptions revealing that these little guys would wander the galaxy before sealing up the Star of Darkness once they discovered it, which led to them becoming planet protectors of sorts. And I guess in one description it also mentioned that they crystallized a fiend capable of destroying the entire galaxy, or the strongest enemy in Japanese. Yeah, they sealed Galactonite. There's no way they didn't seal Galactonite. The Starries also threw the Star of Darkness off course, as the evil meteor figure's description mentions that the star was going to crash on a separate continent, informing us that yes, Genbul was going to land on the Forbidden Island where Lab Discoverer, his sibling's place of imprisonment, resided. On that note, there's also a bit of cool lore we get from this figure here, which depicts Ares and Antares, the spears of the Elphalus siblings, which explains that after Genbul had dropped his spear between phase transitions in the Ultimate Cup ZEX, Chaos Elphalus got a hold of it, with the description even stating that grasping the spear allowed Elphalus to harness the Starry's power and become the Lord of Chaos. And finally, sometimes, Kirby tries to eat Elflin like mint ice cream while they sleep. I didn't say all the lore was going to be deep lore. But remember what I said way back about how Star-Crossed World makes you see the new world from a new perspective for more reasons than just the remixed levels? Remember what I said those stages were alluding to? This is what I meant, this stuff right here. And it recontextualizes and fleshes out so many things from the base game now that we're seeing them from this new angle, centered on the legend of the meteor and all that stuff. We know more about Nachel now, we get confirmation that the New Worlders were without a doubt the Ancients. We find out the truth behind Wandaria, and we learn that Fecto Elphalus had an evil brother working off-screen this entire time. These characters and facets of the world that the lore further explores were exactly what I was referring to when I was yapping about Star-Crossed World's central ideas with its stage design and whatnot. But just like how the Starry stages help in making the game's stages feel more alive and connected, these little lore pieces do that for the greater New World more than anything else, with these details fleshing out the New World more, connecting it to the grander Kirby lore in new ways, and just generally being super cool bits of lore in their own right. Now, with all that lore covered and every last one of the first 85 figures collected, we've unlocked a special song on the EX figure viewing screen, which was the one I was playing just now, by the way. It's a banger. But we've also 100%ed Star-Crossed World, which allows us to see this wonderful celebratory photograph and gifts us a special figure from Astronomer Waddle Dee, complete with a signed message from Elphalin. And it's just... Elphalin. Elphalin. I love you too, dude. Even the thing at the end. And you want to know the best part? When you turn this figure around, look at that. He even signed the thing. That's my guy. That's my freaking guy. Just when I thought I couldn't love you even more, Hal somehow made it happen. You're a legend, Elflin. Just know that. But do you want to know the craziest part about all of this? This isn't even the true 100% completion reward, because if you've 100%ed both the base game and Star-Crossed World, and refreshed Waddle Dee Town by leaving and coming back assuming you met those requirements within the town's borders, and go to check the Waddle Live Corner stage, you'll find a 150th song entitled Last Song. Incomplete. Nachel's unfinished track. And words cannot describe how much I love this song. So let's finally finish this review off and dive right in. Right away, I just love how unfinished this song sounds, which sounds like a crazy thing to be praising, but like, this is an unfinished track in universe after all. And the way the song is presented with this intro where you just hear the audio of Nachel's shoes clicking against the floor as she turns on a tape recorder and starts up the scratchy, low-quality synthesizer that fills in where her vocals would have been. And how the song ends in the same way just sells this fact beautifully. Despite its intentionally unfinished nature though, this song is just as polished and fantastically composed as any other Forgotten Land track though, with it being irresistibly jazzy and catchy, and that aforementioned synthesizer complements it all perfectly. It feels like a suitable substitute for the vocals, and it lines up with the lyrics rather well, and some of those lyrics go unbelievably hard, by the way. They were absolutely cooking with some of these. On the surface, this song is already amazing, with it going for a unique, unfinished style without actually sacrificing any technical quality. But the thing that really makes this song is the lore surrounding it and the meaning behind the lyrics, despite us never actually hearing them be sung in any way. Because all this stuff works not only in enhancing the song on its own, but in giving us more insight into Nachel's character, surprisingly. The lyrics are all written from Nachel's perspective, clearly expressing her regret over her choice to stay behind in the new world as it falls apart, while yearning to travel into space or between dimensions, just wishing to leave the falling new world behind for bigger and better things. And it's surprisingly deep and personal, considering Nachel's other songs are generally more all-encompassing and abstract to say, compared to this one here, but that's what makes the last song so incredible. This song doesn't even last 4 whole minutes, and it's able to characterize Nachel flawlessly, and even after just a month of this song being a thing, I just can't see her as the same enigmatic background singer I used to, mostly thanks to this song fleshing her out so much and making her feel so human. I find it seriously uplifting to see that, despite the more unfortunate aspects of the song and Nachel's situation, that she's able to still get something out of expressing herself through her art and her passion like this. And while it's easy to just label this song as some surprisingly depressing piece or something, which it kinda is, I see it more as something bittersweet, since there's something just so endlessly endearing and borderline inspiring about Nachel's optimism that still shines through as she just puts her dreams and hopes out there of meeting someone, traveling through the galaxy with them, making memories with them, despite the sad truth of it all being that she probably wasn't around much longer after this since, well, you know, it's an unfinished track after all, but who said she was actually dead? Because littered all throughout the song are these lines with Nachel singing about how she'll have white wings soon, or how she wants to have some nice apple pie, or this mention of an artificial heart, all topped off with the Lore Starcutter's beeps that can be heard right around the ending of the song, ripped straight from A Visitor from Afar from Return to Dreamland. Yeah, this has been a surprisingly crazy DLC for Magolor's trusted ship, since it's not only the Link practically confirming the identity of the tech-savvy ancients, but it also might be Nachel? Now, I don't have any clue how in the world that works, or if the song's allusions to the lore are more like in a way to say that the memory of Nachel carries on even after her passing, since in a way her song echoing throughout the galaxy and through the spaceship New World inadvertently granted her wish here, and we all know the less than subtle connection between the New World and the Starcutter. But this right here is some crazy and awesome lore either way, and regardless of whatever interpretation winds up being right, I'm just glad that in some way, Nachel's dream of exploring the galaxy and different dimensions and just making unforgettable memories came true in some sense. And the fact that I'm able to say that about a through-and-through background character who only ever appeared physically in a music festival and served as a minor piece of the New World's lore before Star-Crossed World is just... I love this series, man. Only Kirby games can make such a seemingly random character a new favorite for so many people, myself included, I swear. This whole song really is just such a beautiful track in my eyes that I can't ever imagine getting enough of. And in a way, it embodies so many of this series' best qualities, from the sheer amount of attention to detail, to the deeper underbelly hidden beneath the cheerful exterior, to the fact that this whole song just makes me smile and fills me with optimism, and at the end of the day, what embodies Kirby better than that? This right here is just the perfect final cherry on top of not just Star-Crossed World, but Forgotten Land in general now, and it wouldn't have been possible if it wasn't thanks to this excellent DLC that I wasn't expecting, but I'm so very grateful that we received. Oh, and I didn't want to break the flow of the final boss segment or the figure war lightning round, so I'm betting life's earnings of myself and the next 3 generations of my family that Elphalus and Genwol and whatever else of their kind are out there are related to Void Termina in some way. I've been over the evidence. There's the Jamba Heart parallels, the cores that sometimes gain a single giant eyeball, the idea of them having these sorts of good and evil facets to them, all the talk about chaos and stuff, the freaking Song of Supplication motif in Lagrange point. There's not just this many connections or parallels if something's not up with these guys. Maybe the Elphalus siblings are reincarnations of Void, maybe they're the New World Dimensions Voids, maybe they're the reincarnations of some New World Dimension Void we don't know about, but either way, you heard it here first, folks. Or at least I think so. But either way, there's a connection. I can just feel it. But that is Star-Crossed World. And as I said, this really is the expansion I don't think anyone was expecting, but it came out absolutely stellar. Now, I'm sure you noticed that besides the occasional critique about things like the New World's horrendous starry coin economy, that I haven't really complained or criticized anything in Star-Crossed World, really, so is it perfect? Not exactly, but hey, nothing is. Except for Kirby 64. The catch with Star-Crossed World, though, is that most of my criticisms come more from what could have been rather than what we actually received, which is why I haven't really spoken up much about them. It's true that HAL could have added more in the way of new stuff, or they could have given us a full and new Fallen Star Volcano stage, or they could have added more treasure roads for the new mouthful modes. And I won't lie and say I'm not at least a tiny bit bummed by the lack of each of these things. But I feel like when most of my criticisms are just nitpicks or what-ifs, it should really be telling that Star-Crossed World is just a high-quality expansion as a whole, since it just nails everything it actually sets out to do. Star-Crossed World may only be like 4 or 5 hours tops, with only a few completely new additions to shake things up here and there, but it's an amazing 4 to 5 hours with fantastic new additions, brilliant reworkings of old stages and ideas that feel totally fresh, stunning visuals and music, a phenomenal climax, some of the craziest lore in any Kirby game yet, and it even almost entirely improved the base game on top of all of that, with that sweet 4K 60 FPS bump, and all the new little Easter eggs and stuff, even if those technical improvements really should have been free, but at least Star-Crossed World makes the payment for that upgrade worthwhile thanks to how incredible all the new content is. And it makes me just really hope that Star-Crossed World can set a sort of standard for future Switch 2 editions to follow, because if all of them were like this, oh, the world would be a better place. Star-Crossed World really is some of the finest Kirby gaming you can find, and it's more than got me looking forward to see what HAL is cooking up for the next new mainline title, since if this is anything to go by, it's gonna be something special. Although for now, all we can do is wait, and passing the time by replaying Star-Crossed World sounds like just what I want to do right now. Oh crap, the withdrawal's kicking in, I gotta have this one fast! So if you like this video, leave a like. If you didn't, leave a dislike, and if you want more content like this, then be sure to subscribe. Also, I've got a Twitter and a Blue Sky, so be sure to check those out. The links are in the description. And so, with all of that said, it's good to be back, and Pekachow out!